Design Preservation Models is proud to bring you this step-by-step video, filmed at the Model Railroading University and produced by Master Model Railroader and owner Miles Hale. Miles will show you how to assemble and paint DPM building kits. In addition, you will learn various tips and techniques on detailing your buildings, including weathering, windows, shades, and much more. Miles is a renowned trainer and demonstrator of Woodland Scenics model scenery and DPM buildings.
Hello, my name is Miles Hale. I'm with Model Railroad University, and we're here to talk today about building DPM kits, N-scale, HO, and O-scale. The techniques we're going to show you essentially apply to all three scales, and all of the buildings go together in exactly the same way. The only exception are the O-scale kits, which are resin and require an epoxy cement to put them together, and we'll go over that towards the end of the video. One of the first things that you learn when you come to Model Railroad University is our lesson we call scale. And it simply applies with these two little pieces here. If you walked into the hobby shop, they would be labeled on the shelves. And why don't you take a quick look at them and see what you think they might be used for. You'd probably say that these are N-scale bridge sides. And you're right by the manufacturer. Atlas labels on the side of their box N-scale truss bridge sides. But in actuality, the first time that I ever saw them, they were hanging from an O-scale engine house as roof trusses. And I've also seen them used in N-scale where a really heavy bridge side is needed. So what scale are these? They're whatever scale you need them to be for your railroad, and whatever they look like they could be applicable to on your railroad. So do they have scale? Yes, but only in and of themselves. How they relate to your railroad will be determined by you. So next time you walk into the hobby shop, look around some of the other scale aisles and see what they have to offer, because detail parts and other parts that you're going to use around your railroad may not be exactly the scale that the manufacturer says you ought to be using them for. Let's take a look at the tools that are needed to build a DPM kit. I start off with a piece of melamine board. It could be either white or brown, doesn't make any difference, and a sheet of 100 grit sandpaper. Spray glue on the back of the sandpaper, spray glue down on the melamine board, stick it down as I've done with this board. You could drill a couple of holes in it to mount on your workbench, or you can clamp it down. Either way works extremely well. The most important tool that we use, of course, is an X-Acto knife with a new X-Acto blade. Be sure and keep a bunch of them around so that you have a nice sharp blade to work with. They just cut and they work much better if they're new and sharp. I really love this file from Lowe's. It's called a General Purpose. It's characterized by the teardrop handle. Absolutely fantastic file. It has a smooth side and a rougher side. Great for working plastic. The other essential item, I think, is a square for keeping the individual parts themselves square as we do the assembly. Now, kind of optional on this would be angle blocks or 1, 2, 3 blocks. This is characterized by the fact that it's 1 inch by 2 inch by 3 inches. Both of these are available from MSC, Enco, or Micromart. Has them in their catalog as well. The other essential items, of course, are solvents. And I like 10X7 for a very fast acting solvent, and the Faller Expert, which is available in your hobby shops or from Walthers. It's absolutely fantastic. It has a little styrene dissolved in it. It has some of the same solvents as the 10X7, but it's much thicker and it stays put. It allows you a little working time with the parts. If you're just starting off building DPM kits, this is a great adhesive to use. And we'll show you how, even if you're an expert, you want to use some of this later on in your construction. For applying those solvent glues, I personally like a syringe. I use a glass one so that the black stopper won't be dissolved. One of our other instructors here at the university really likes the polypropylene applicator. This, again, the bottle won't be dissolved by the solvent. Has a hypodermic needle. Great for putting on the glues. 10X7 also sells a glass rod with a hypodermic needle on it in the hobby shops that you can use for putting on small dots of the glue. And the only other optional thing that I really like to have, you don't have to have it, but it's nice to have, are the dial calipers. In this case, I can measure the top and the bottom of walls, take all kinds of dimensions. They're great for scribing. If I get a dimension set, I can come along on a piece of plastic, catch one edge, and actually scribe it and mark it for cutting. they're absolutely a fantastic tool. If you want to go a little more high dollar, the digital calipers save you the trouble of learning how to read the dial. They actually read out directly on the digital scale. They're much easier to use. Dial calipers start at about $6. Digital ones start off at about $15, so they're fairly inexpensive. Very few tools required for the construction, so let's get to building. The DPM kit comes from the hobby shop with a beautiful color rendition of the building finished up, and we'll use that kind of as a guide as we go through today. Also contained in the kit is glazing material as well as some detailed instructions on how to put the kit together. Also has, of course, the front wall, 2 side walls, back wall, door, and some material to make the roof out of. And we'll use all of those here in the next few minutes. One key tool that I did not cover in the tool section are nippers. We have some sprue pieces here sticking out on the kit, and we want to nip those off any place on any of the walls to square them up. The next thing we'll do is we'll take a look at the kit and see where the brick detail is. On the front, we almost never sand the front of a DPM kit because the detail wraps around both sides. The rule of thumb here is any detail on the sides, don't sand it. I will check the back, however, where we have these casting sprues, or actually they're the ejector pins coming through. We need to eliminate those, especially if they're standing proud or tall of the back. And that means that I'll need to take that to my sanding block and sand those off. I'll also sand the bottom here because there is a draft angle present on the part, and we want to eliminate the draft angle, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second. So give me a minute, I'll go ahead and clean up these parts, get the sprues and pieces, or the casting nibs cut off, and then we'll go to the sanding block and show you what to do over there. Okay, it's very easily done for nipping. I just simply put the flat side next to this and trim off any of the parts that don't belong. In this particular kit, actually I don't need these 2 tabs, but just simply scoring at the top of the door a couple times. These are styrene, so they break off pretty much just like a styrene part would, and we'll break off those tops and those bottoms of that doorway to get the doorway down to the right size. There we go. Now this, we're going to need to flatten on the bottom, and I usually just touch the top. It's not necessary, but a little touch up on the top helps out also for the doorway. On our actual parts, of course, we have a draft angle on the bottom, and we have draft angles on the side, but we also have detail on the side, so no sanding. Just take the front and we'll sand off at the bottom to get that part down so that building can set, because it would weigh many tons. It should set flat on your layout. So we'll sand that just enough to get those down to where they're pretty flat. Then on the sides, we do the same thing. Sand the bottom, and I don't have detail on the front of the casting, so I can sand that. I'm not going to sand the back of the casting because it has detail. Almost every DPM building is put together the same way, including this N scale kit. I have these sides going against the front, so my detail wraps around. The back of the side wraps around, so my back piece has no detail on either side. Both sides of my back are going to need to be filed or sanded down to get them square and flush. Real quick look at molds now. If I have a molding machine, I have sloped sides. It has ejector pins that come up through that push the part out, and therefore my part comes out with draft angle. And that's why we need to come back in and take that draft angle and sand it square so that my front or my back can fit exactly tight up against that instead of having some weird angle that it's going to appear to have. So we do need to sand the parts to get rid of that. Now, we talked about the back. I have ejector pins here that are sticking up proud of the part. That's going to keep my glazing from going back in against the back of the part. So I'm going to check all my parts for anything that's standing proud, lay my part down flat on the sanding block, and actually sand the bottom of that part until I get those nibs down to where this back is actually flat. So give me a minute, I'll sand some edges that don't have detail, and I'll sand some backs, and we'll be right back. I have tried to make sure in every case that I've kept these walls absolutely square as I've gone along and worked on them. The other thing I've done is taken the 2 side walls, put them together and put them down on the table and made sure that they stay the same length. One thing that'll throw me out of square is if one wall were happen to be longer or shorter than the other, that would throw me out of square. So I want to make sure that those walls stay the same length. On the front now, and all the rest of the walls, I'm going to go through here and look and see if we have any flash on the inside of the windows. The DPM kits are usually pretty clean. That one's absolutely gorgeous. I have a little fuzz here from the sanding that I did, not from the kit, and so I can trim some of that out. Sometimes the window mullions have a little bit on them. We can make those look a little smaller just by simply trimming them and cleaning them up. You can look at the back usually and tell if it's going to be a little bit of flash. These are all looking great. Those all look good. So my next step now, this step you want to discipline yourself to do, and it's hard to do once you get in here in the excitement of starting to build and everything starting to come together. Lay the front down at least and trace out the window pattern and door pattern of your kit. This is where your graphics and the detail from your dry transfers or your decals that you're going to put in the building are going to go. So you want to know what size this is and where the window locations are, so that now I can come back with my dry transfers, lay my acetate, my window sheet down on here, and put my dry transfers and whatever in the windows. Then I cut out that acetate and it simply glues in here and it automatically locates. So it's an important step to go through early on now before I get this thing glued together and I can't get paper back here against this back portion. And of course I did sand all the backs to make sure that acrylic or that clear window can actually lay onto the front of the building. Okay, now we're going to take a look at sanding the parts. I put my sanding block on the sanding board, and then I use that to sand against to get that bottom square. And don't move the block because you'll sand it, but you can move the part. I like to move mine in a circle or an angle, but the block will help you learn to sew the piece up to square it. Now we're going to work on the door. The side lights have two angles, a shallow angle and a sharp angle. We're going to put the shallow angle next to the doorway. Trial fit. And I've sand those on the sanding block just to get the angles back so they're absolutely straight. Then we'll apply some glue to it, both sides, softens it a little bit better. And now we'll rub them just a little bit to kind of melt them together. The other side glued up, both sides, makes them melt together a little bit better. Just like that, that quickly. And the parts are stuck and ready to put onto the back wall. Now we're going to put some glue on the sides, both here, or both sides of the door, and then we'll line it up to fit just inside the side walls of the door. All right, now I want to sew that down, bottom all that door up. Now it's a little bit out of square. I think you can even see it. The door is leaning this direction. So I want to start playing with it a little bit and getting it to square absolutely as square as it possibly can be. And now we're ready to go ahead and glue the other walls on. Alright, here we're going to begin to apply the side walls. I line them up with just a little bit of a reveal, just a little bit back from the edge of the front. I'm using my fingers on the back to hold alignment while I use the 10x7. It's much faster, glues almost immediately, and we can go to the other side wall. We'll glue it on again with the 10x7, hold alignment. Flopped a little bit of so much weight, but that's alright, we can just realign. The back is cast a little bit long. We need to sand that down. It's about a half brick wide, so we'll take it over on the sandpaper, give it a couple of swipes, and then we'll check it to make sure that it's the right width. It should be square front to back. Check it with a square, make sure it stayed square. And now we can use its own weight, the building's own weight, to hold it down tight and glue the back wall into place. Again with the 10x on one side, align it again on the other side, a little 10x7, and our building goes together just that quickly. It's absolutely amazing. Large bag of these rubber bands, and we'll use a few of them. They're kind of large sized, as you can see, bands, if we can get them apart here. And I'm going to put those around the building, and they're going to go, no, they're a little too loose. Okay, let's double them. double that over. The beautiful thing about a DPM building is that it can be rubber banded and held together while it dries because of the way Bob Lundy, the founder of DPM, originally designed these buildings. And you can see I'm pretty rough with it, and we did just glue it. I've only been gone for about 30 seconds or so here, and we're back to working on the building. Now what I can do is take my squaring block if I want and put it in here and clamp to that. But the building's really holding itself pretty square because we sanded all the edges square, so there's really no reason to put a squaring block in. It'll pretty much hold itself the whole time. We'll check the door one more time, make sure that we haven't gone soft on that. And it looks like we're okay on that. It's nice and square. So we'll let that building set for a few minutes, let it dry, and then we'll rubber bands off. Now one thing I don't do is put the rubber bands on while I'm doing the gluing because I don't want them to get in here and have that glue capillary back in underneath and ruin my my sides. So I don't do that while it's actually going up. But now I can come back, and any places where I have some bad places I can come along, if it's oozed out at all, and just simply give it a light trim. Bring my sanding block back into play here. And what I do have, however, is a little bit of this door hanging down. So I'm going to put my fingers in here and support it, and I'm just going to run that over and get that building down as flat as I possibly. That's looking pretty good, and you can't see any gaps down and around the bottom of that building, so that's looking pretty good. We'll lose the sanding. Okay, here we're bringing in our roof section, and we're going to line up one edge against the front of the building and make a tick mark at that width. Then we'll simply turn the sheet around and mark it at the back. I'm going to keep the same edge of the plastic against the side of the building, mark over with another tick mark. Now if I've kept everything straight front to back and side to side, I should be able to simply connect those two marks and I'll be square. If not, I need to make that width mark at the back of the building to keep it from being out of square. A quick scribe, snap, we're in business. Looks good front to back. So we'll put it inside the building now and check it for length. Again, a little tick mark, try not to bow it. And this time we can use a square since we have pretty much a square building. And we'll go ahead and snap that off. And everything's looking good, except fitting pretty well up the top. It's not fitting at the bottom. Alright, so what we can do is bring our sanding block back in and pull it up here. And it's a great little device. We just simply sand down on those edges until we get a fit. It's fitting pretty well at the back. Let's square this. It has a, well, we need a little bit at the front, so I'm going to put more pressure on this front part. Sand that down. I just want it to just barely fit in there. I'm trying to do all this. That's fitting pretty well, really, there. I'm trying to do all this before I put the chimneys on. That's fitting pretty square and pretty nice and tight. So that's good. Just so we don't get it confused with the other pieces, we'll mark on the bottom of this that it's the roof. Okay. Alright, so now we'll take a look at the chimneys. The chimneys do have a left and a right to them. Let's see if I can get a couple of them here that are opposite. You notice that some of them are sloping back this direction, some of them are sloping back the other direction. So the correct one for my side over here would be this chimney, because my roof is going to slope to the back. And I'll look that over. If it has any flash on it, I want to clean it up. And it's not too bad. On the back, if I have any kind of an ejector pin sticking out, I'm going to file that down. Here's one that's sticking up tall and proud. Take my rough side. Now, I can either use the Faller glue and maneuver these around, or I can use the 10x7. I'm kind of going to go for speed, so we'll go with the 10x7. We'll get a little drop right up there, right on. I usually try and let it ooze a little bit, put a little pressure on this to hold it together. What I'm trying to do here is line up the cap, this top of the chimney, and the sides. I look at it from the side and make sure that it's actually going on there nice and square. And it is. The caps are all lined up, so I'll leave that one alone. And now I'll go ahead and I'll glue up the rest of the chimneys, and we'll come back in a second. Alright, I've glued all the chimneys but one. I want to point out one other thing. On the bottom where I have draft angle, I am going to file that and try and maintain the angle that it's going back, but yet make it square. That'll make my roof fit on there a little bit better. So we'll glue this last one in place. Now the draft angle at the top of the chimney, however, by the cap, up on the top, I did not try to file that. I let that ride. Let's see if it doesn't work a little bit better. I don't try and take that draft angle off the top of the chimney up above the cap just yet. I'm going to use that to my advantage here a little bit later. That gives me a little meat, so when I come back and file these, I can get them absolutely flat from one to another. So there's our chimneys put together, and that's pretty much ready to go. We have our roof already fitted up, so we're really in pretty good shape. We could actually go ahead and start to mount the roof to the bottom of the building, and we'll do that next. Alright, now we're going to start putting our roof in from underneath. We push it up against the chimneys and make sure it's nice and tight. We'll cut the sticks that are supports to the length and drop them in place. Little 10x7 on them. Quick check for alignment. Not bad. Then we'll put some more glue on this, or some more solvent on this, to make sure that it stays down. I want to melt those chimneys into the roof, so a little on top, a little on the bottom. Tap them in, make sure they're down tight, and then we'll move to the other side. All looking good. Now the last thing we're going to do on this roof is use a little of the Faller cement. Remember, it has body to it. It has some styrene in it. So by simply running around here, we are going to create a roof fillet. Whenever a roofing company does their roofing with their black tar, they run the plaster, or the tar, up onto the side of the building. And that's what this is going to do for us, is give us just a little bit of a fillet right there where that tar actually wraps up onto the side of the building. And when that dries, it will dry with a little bit of that fillet, just because of the styrene that's left behind by the solvent when it evaporates away. So it's a neat little trick to make your building look better up on top, and it only takes a few seconds. The last detail that we have to take care of are the chimneys. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my file on the far chimney, bring it down on the near one, and I'm going to try and keep this fairly level and just stroke once or twice. The main chimney I'm trying to get is the one that's closest to me, and I just want to get it nice and flat. I'll do this on both sides because, again, the one closest to me is the one I'm trying to get flat. Just enough to take that draft angle off. The last thing I have to do is, again, bear on the far side, come against this one, and this time I'm trying to square up that side of that cap. And the last thing I'll do is take my X-Acto knife, and where I have some flash down here on this side, I'll trim that off. And I'll do that around all four sides of the chimneys. Here we have the DPM display done for the hobby shops, and it was done in conjunction with Woodland Scenics. They were illustrating here the color combinations that are used on buildings in the city. A building owner would normally take and buy the highest quality hard-fired brick for the front of the building, but he would buy a much lesser quality or lesser costly brick to do the other three sides of the building. These bricks normally came from the local brickyard and were called common bricks. And they normally have a much lighter red tone, or they actually have a tan tone to them. And you want to paint a majority of your buildings in your city with this common brick color back on the back. You can vary the colors of the front very widely, but be sure and pick the same kind of common brick color for the back so that your city has a tendency to hang together. The other thing that the building owner would do is pick a paint color for the windows and the door trim that complemented his dark brick that he'd paid so much money for. But then he would buy this paint in bulk and paint the windows the rest of the way around, all with that same color, whether or not it went with the side brick or not. Of course, the roofs are normally done in black. They're usually tarred or rocked, and we'll go through a couple of ways of doing those as well. And here we've added our dry transfers onto our windows and pasted our acetate onto the front. This is an N-scale example of the same type of building. Again, dark fired brick on front, concrete details, white for the windows to make them pop out, but exactly the same colors done the rest of the way around the building, and then the black roof for the tarred roof. Now in this case we kind of darkened the chimneys, and we'll do that on ours as well. But let's take a look at our building and go ahead and get started on painting it. Alright, now we have our building ready to paint the front, and we're going to make some frisket. And I use a paper towel, take some masking tape, and simply stick it across the front edge. A quick cut and we've got a piece of frisket. And we'll actually mask that right down the edge, the joint between the front piece and the side piece of the kit. Wrap it around and across, and it's looking pretty good. We need a little extra piece added on, and we'll cut it off. Then we can simply take the frisket and wrap it a little bit back at the back. Anything just to keep the paint off the sides. Wrap it like a Christmas present, tuck it in, and we're all ready to go. And just that quickly, we're ready to paint. Hi, now I'm in the paint booth, and I just want to give you a quick tour around and show you some of the features that you may want to incorporate in your own paint booth. Here we have two airbrushes set up with a double manifold, one that I can use for acrylic paints, another one that we can use for lacquer paints. The acrylic paint one is an external mix. I find that it's much better. It's a little more open and shoots the acrylics a little bit better. The lacquer based brush that I use is an internal mix brush, double action, and it works equally well, but it works better for the lacquer based paints. I normally use Flocal and either Poly-S or Badger Model Flex in the acrylics. Flocal for the lacquer and Model Flex or Poly-S for the acrylic paints. And that's what we're going to use today for starting off, is the Flocal paint. And then we'll give you a tour around some of the rest of the paint booth. This is our airbrush holders and double manifold. I also keep a pair of scissors hanging around. They're usually handy for using. One of the main things that I really like are the Badger paint mixers. These are absolutely fantastic for sticking down in the bottles and mixing. They're technically what the paint industry calls a disperser. They don't actually have a blade on. They have kind of a flat, wavy surface, and it does a beautiful job of mixing paints. I also keep a holder here for open jars so that they can't get tipped over. And I have an eyedropper of lacquer thinner or water, whichever I'm using as a thinner at the time, that I can drop just a few drops in to use as thinners. Here we see the filtering system, easily removable, so I can change them out. There's a baffling system behind that, and then a furnace cage blower behind that moves a great deal of air, so I always have air coming through from the back side of me, and the paint tends to stay out in front of me and not where I don't have to breathe it. The rest of the booth has some convenience items like screwdrivers and pliers, etc. And on around to the side then I have some baskets and some cleaning materials, all within easy reach, and that's the key to making a paint booth work, is to have everything within an easy reach. Alright, now we're ready to paint, and what I'm going to use here is the Flocal. In this case we'll use a Tuscan, which will give us a nice dark red brick on the front. I almost always, when I first open the paint can, mix it with the Badger mixer, and I've already done that, so I've kind of cheated. We'll make sure that our airbrush is working, and it is. I keep a clean bottle of Diasol on there all the time, mainly for clean outs, and get rid of whatever excess is in that, and into our paint. I have modified the cap on this airbrush. This is the standard Pache cap attachment, but I've taken the Pache bottle cap off and put a Flocal bottle cap on, so I simply just stick right down the bottle and start painting. A lot of painters don't like to do that. For me it's convenient, so I just go for it. I'm going to spray this building first of all from the bottom, looking up. The brick detail in DPM buildings is absolutely fantastic, so you've got to go from every angle in order to get down into the groove. So I went from the left that time, go from the left on those bricks, come from the bottom. Now I'll come from the right side, and then I'll come from the top. And lots of times I find it necessary to come back then and look straight on at it and spray again. And just make sure that I've got it all. If there are any light spots, I'll come back now and touch them up. And if this looks pretty good, maybe a little light on top of those cornice pieces. Actually, all I'm after is the bricks, so that's pretty good. My red will act kind of as a primer now for my acrylics when I go to hand paint this front. Here we have our two buildings ready to go. On N scale, I do paint the inside of the building black because the walls are so thin that any lighting you put in might shine through the walls. So a little black paint, a little Krylon blackens them and makes them look much better. On our HO building, we'll peel off the masking from our spraying of the hard fired brick from the front, just like opening a Christmas present. See what it looks like. Looks pretty good. Now, the walls on the side really are kind of shiny, and although they're close to a brick color that you might use in your area or find in your area for common brick, we're going to need to paint them. So we'll make some more Frisket mask, just a little masking tape on the front of a paper towel again, and this time we'll use the red line of the hard fired brick as our line to tape to. So we'll just start masking that off, get it all taped up all the way around the front of the building. Fit it in nice and tight. We don't want any paint to slop over or to spray back in underneath all of that brick. A little extra piece to finish out with, and we'll cut off the excess. Wrap it back up like a Christmas present. This one's a little easier because all we have to do is wrap the front itself. Now we do have a problem, however, in the fact that now the paint will be able to come into the inside of the building and may hit on the inside of the walls, and I really don't want it to do that. So what we'll do is we'll start taking some masking tape and tape off the insides of the windows themselves. I've masked off the front, exposed the common brick, mask off the windows so that they won't have paint flowing on the inside of this. And now it's ready to go back to the paint booth and spray off the common brick color. Alright, now we're ready to spray on our common brick color, and again from the bottom we're going to spray it from the top angle, the left side, right side, every angle that you can think of to get this brick sprayed around and to catch all the details. Now we're going to also spray the chimneys up here on top, and again we have to get all the angles on them as well. So we'll spray them from all four sides. I'll spray the back of the cap piece, the cornice piece, and as well then I'll come back and spray the rest of the details of the roof itself. Alright, now we're ready to start painting our building with the hand painting. I've made a block of wood here that has some paint brushes in it, holes just drilled along it. I have several different types of brushes that I like. Rounds, some flats where they have only one dimension, and then also my favorite kind are the kind that are cut on an angle, where they're flats but they have an angular cut to them. They do the details, I think, around the windows much better. I've bored a hole in it to hold my paint bottles, hold several different sizes. I have a tendency to knock them over when I'm not paying attention or when I'm trying to concentrate on the building itself, so it just makes it a little safer around the workbench. I use several different types of paints. I go to Hobby Lobby, Michael's, the hobby shop, look around. These are some of the ceramic paints or the paints that are made for the crafters. You can also go to the gaming department or the fantasy game military department. This is one brand that I use from the hobby shop for the gamers. And of course we always use some of the favorites, Poly S from Flocal. I like Badger a great deal for airbrush work, and these are the paints that we're going to actually use on the windows themselves. We'll use some light ivory paint to actually paint the window detail. And then we'll open our package, our Christmas present again here in a second, and see what it looks like. And it's looking pretty good. We got the nice fired brick on the front. Alright, this video clip's going to be sped up quite a bit, but it'll show you exactly how we did paint the windows. Catching this detail is absolutely the easiest part of the kit because it's such a great casting. Details easy to catch with this chiseled edge brush, and you can literally paint these windows not quite as fast as we're showing you, but darn close. We actually painted this building in about 15 minutes for all the windows and doors, and we're just about ready to finish up this top window here, and we'll move down to the store display window and the store front. Again, the details are raised so nicely that you can just catch them with the edge of that brush and the paint flows just right on. A little bit of mistake we rubbed off there, not too hard to do. As we come down this side now, we're going to make a little mistake down here at the bottom of the post in just a second as we begin to fill in the panel down at the bottom. And we're going to slop it over on the post right there. No mistake, so we go for a little water, rinse it off, blot it, and we paint the detail right back in. We're right back in business just that quickly. Flip it around to the side window. Again, the great raised detail makes it awfully easy to paint these windows. Just that quick, we're done. Looking at cleanup now, the building is pretty well along. Looks pretty good with its white windows ready to go. One thing that I like to use for cleanup is Windex. Marty Vaughn, one of our instructors here at the university, told me that really Windex is the thing to use because of the ammonia that's in it. And he's 100% right, because for cleanup you can't beat the Windex and the little bit of ammonia that it has in it. It just works beautifully well for cleaning out my brushes. So I put them back in the water container and then I actually wash them out with the Windex. If I have a little extra excess left on there of the paint, the Windex just really takes it off in a hurry. Does a beautiful job of cleaning out the brushes. And for the dried paint that gets on your hands, you can't beat the Windex again for taking it off. It does a marvelous job of cleaning off even dried old acrylic paint, and it'll rejuvenate your brushes. It's pretty nice. It's non-toxic. Does just a great job of cleanup. So keep a bottle of Windex with its ammonia around and you'll find cleanups a whole lot easier. We're going to take a look now and we'll set up for doing the details, the gray concrete details around our building. Alright, now what we're going to do is add some of the gray color to the front of the building. And we'll start off up here on the beautiful tops of these windows. The detail in the DPM molds is absolutely fantastic. It allows you to just come in and catch the tops. And all I'm trying for here is an illusion. If I paint the tops of these well enough to where they're nice and crisp and sharp, you'll believe that the whole concrete piece is actually coming out of the building. And that's what model railroading is an illusion. So we're just trying to create an illusion with this paint rather than trying to paint each and every side of every one of these details. Sharp tops, and they really come out looking great. We'll paint the sills down on the bottom. And one thing about railroading, of course, is that you look down on a model. So we want to paint the tops of the sills in this case, because you will see that gap between the bottom of the window and the window sill itself. Then we'll come around, we'll paint all across the headers, cornice pieces, and the posts, and we'll paint the caps and the sills, the lintels and the sills on the windows. Alright, now we have all of our details painted, and they're looking great all the way around. We've painted the tops of the chimneys even with a little of the gray concrete paint. And now we're going to be ready to do the roof. So let's come out. We'll get a really large brush. I like this one because it's angled. It makes a nice sharp cut. We'll mix the paint. And we'll start with a really good loaded up brush so that we get a nice wet load on. We want to make sure that we get that all the way around. Looking good. And we want to slop that up onto the parapet walls. The tar roofers would have those big mops and they slop it up onto the side walls purposely to make a water seal. So this is not a place where we've got to be really, really neat. We want to slop it up around that little fillet that we made with the Faller's Expert Glue, that little rounding up onto the side. We're going to stroke this paint from the front to the back, just like the water would actually run down the roof. Alright, now we're going to touch the tops of the chimneys, just put a little black on them, kind of pre-weather them. The building's looking pretty good, so we'll move on to the next step. Let's take a look at some other things that you can do with the roof. Once I have the plastic cut to size, this is just a sample or example, I can take that and use it as my template, glue it or just lay it onto some emery cloth paper. This is just some black 600 grit, and I could use that as a template then, cut this out, and now when I flipped it over and got ready to go, I would have, let's use this one as a little bit better example, I would have a black roof that I could then fit into my building, and it would have texture instead of being the flat type of roof that we did on our painted building. So the other thing we can do, not all roofs are totally done in the mopped tar like that. Some of them actually have some texture of their own, and we can actually take that emery paper and cut it into strips. In this case I cut it into 3-foot HO strips, and I would glue these strips then starting at the bottom just as the roofers would. Glue that on, then come in and glue another strip overlapping and continue to glue. Now to make this look more realistic, I might want to come along here every once in a while and cut a short piece, put that in, make an overlap again in both directions. Let's bring that down. Make an overlap in both directions and continue right on, and I can lay up an entire roof this way. Looks pretty neat, has a nice color, and if I were to come back now and use my brush with some straight engine black, I could mop around some of the joints as if they had been repaired, and I'd have a two-tone roof, which would look very nice also. Another thing that we can use is camera tape. This is sold in the photographic stores as well as being sold in a lot of art stores, and it's simply black masking tape. And this stuff is really pretty good for making roofs. The only caution is that it is masking tape, and you're probably going to have to cover it over with some Flocal dull coat or some kind of a sealer to seal it out so that it won't lift as time goes on. And again, I would probably cut this in half and make it an HO width, but it has a nice texture to it, just a little bit different look that you can give your roof. And again, you could mop in between, or you could spray this with weather black or some other black to give it a different tone. So there's a lot of things that we can do to treat roofs on buildings to make them look even better. This is the roof of our building, and it's not looking bad, but there's a lot of things that we could have done to it to have given it a really neat look. Now what we want to do is start taking a look at some of the detail parts that are available for the building that we've been working on. And the DPM, of course, offers their roof and trim kit, and this has a myriad assortment of parapet walls, the inside brick that we could put on the inside of the wall to make it look a little bit more detailed, a little bit more realistic, as well as a whole bunch of roof vents and roof hatches, etc. It's a great little kit, fairly inexpensive, and certainly compatible with any of the DPM buildings that we're working on. Also, several aftermarket manufacturers now are making acetate windows that can be applied directly to a DPM building. This one happens to be for Char's Soda Shop and N scale, but these are also made in HO as well as in O scale by 2 or 3 different manufacturers. This one's from Main Street Graphics. Of course, there's a myriad assortment of other details that we can put on roofs. Skylights, these are from SS Limited. gas meters can be on the side of the building. Don't want to ever forget the side of the building. Roof vents, all kinds of things from them. Laser Kit has some chimneys, some smoke vents that can be used. These are kind of nice. Put 2 or 3 of them up on top of a roof. Master Creations has pigeons and all kinds of birds that you can put on top in all different scales. This is HO. Again, another turbine vent. We have pallets. And in this case, we have both pallets in N and HO. These are the N-scale pallets from Woodland Scenics. They also have HO ones, and these are the ones from Durango Press. And remember that pallets do not really have a scale. Normally, yes, they're 3x4, but they've been seen as small as 2x2 for some printers. So these N-scale pallets would work just as well on an HO building. If you harken back to the first lesson we had about scale and what it is for you, these are perfectly usable. So be sure, even if you're in HO, scour the N-scale aisles for detail parts, because detail parts oftentimes are either larger or smaller. Prime example, microtrains. This is a generator which is made to be a load on a flat car. Make a great generator on top of our HO building. We bring it in here. This one, in fact, might be even just a little bit big for this building. We might go to like the DPM Hotel would be a better situation for this generator. But anything is possible along that way. You just have to see how it scales to your building. Roof vents, roof hatches. This happened to be a hatch for a diesel engine, but it would make a great roof hatch because of the door and the raised portion around it, apron around it, that you could put up on your roof. And barrels, crates, all kinds of things are thrown up on roofs. There's been a lot of brass etched parts now coming onto the market, and these are absolutely fantastic. These happen to be some clock faces and some other details, weather vanes that could be put on top. They really work great. These are from Engineering, which is another great company for detail parts. And of course, Lightworks, which is by Miller Engineering. These are absolutely fantastic. This one's made to actually come out of the side. We'll bring our building in here again. This is made to actually come out of the side of the building and make a lighted sign, neon sign on the side of the building. This one is actually N-scale, but as you can see, it scales perfectly to my HO building. So N-scale, again, perfectly possible. You just have to scale the sign next to the building and see what actually fits and works. And along that line, what I want to do real quickly is show you an example of this lighted sign for you to take a look at. Here we're looking down the street at the building that we've been working on and building, and I've lit up one of the Miller Engineering signs in its original package so that you can kind of see it. But it's an absolutely fantastic addition for your building. Looks great once they light up. Here we have the DPM roof and trim kit that we talked about earlier. It has several parapet wall pieces on it, as well as all of our roof hatches. And the first thing I want to show you is I've taken one of the parapet walls and measured it to the length of the building, and then sanded it, notched it so that it'll fit in. And if I had wanted to add this onto my building, it would have made a great detail up there at the front of the building, especially if this building was going to be seen from behind, where I might want to add that detail to it. Now let's take a look at how we're going to mount these detail parts for painting. Alright, what I've done here is cut off all of the pieces using the nippers that we've used before. And then I've taken all the parts and filed them wherever the little casting sprue was attached. So now we have a lot of those parts ready to put on our paint stick. And all I'm going to do for a paint stick is take some masking tape. I'll tear off a little bit longer than what we need. I'm going to tear it in a couple places here. Well, shorter now. I'm going to put sticky side to sticky side on this end and sticky side to sticky side on that end. And then on my stick, I'm going to wrap it a little bit around the end and stick it. And on this end, I'm going to stretch it, stick it down there. Now I have a place where I can go through and I can stick all of my detail parts so that I can paint them without necessarily having to handle them. Right, now I've applied all the parts to the paint stick, and so they're ready to go to the paint booth. And we're going to spray most of these with an old silver, or I'll spray it with a brighter silver and then weather it down with a little weathered black, the same weathered black that we used for our roof, so that they'll tend to blend and so that the weathering will tend to look similar. Let's take this parapet off of here. And we'll come back and we'll apply the roof detail. All right, we have our parts painted now, and they're all on our tape, double-sided, whatever piece that we put on our paint stick. Now we can come back with some of our roof details, and we can actually apply those up onto our roof, our hatch, and etc. And to do that, what I like to do is take a little crazy glue, ACC, whatever you want to call it. I put a little bit out on a piece of cardstock or a piece of plastic, just a little bit. And then with either an X-Acto knife or a pair of tweezers, I can now just get a little bit of that, kind of wipe it off a little bit. Let's put it down here so I can stab it. And that just gets a little bit on the back. And then you can either use an accelerator, or I could just simply stick it on there. And it will dry, it'll harden up. And let's put a vent. Do that probably with my fingers. Again, wipe a little bit of it off so we just get it a little bit wet on the bottom. I'll put that down there. Oops. There we go. It'll eventually stick. And maybe we'll put a little smaller vent sticking up. Maybe we got a bathroom or something over here in this corner. And I do kind of try and stand them up pretty much as straight as we possibly can get them. That's looking pretty good. To be straight the other way too. That's not too bad. If we want to, what we can do is take some of our accelerator and just hit that, and it will freeze it a little faster. Accelerator, if you're not familiar with it, it's an activator accelerator. Most of the crazy glue companies sell them to go with their products, and it just simply makes the crazy glue set a whole lot faster. Some of these are a little oily, more oily than others. This is one I particularly like, doesn't particularly have any oil residue once it leaves. But now I'm starting to get some detail on that roof. Now the other thing I can add, of course, would be some of those Woodland Scenics pallets, and that would be some nice detail to add. But one thing we haven't done yet is add some life to our roof. And I think the Woodland Scenics and some other people who make the people figures absolutely adds a great deal of interest to the building. So this happens to be the roofer set, and that's an ideal set for us to use. Let's get rid of our crazy glue so we don't end up putting something in that. We'll bring this back to the front. Now I have already taken some of the Woodland Scenics accent glue and painted it on the bottom of a couple of these figures. This glue is fantastic because it stays active for a long period of time, almost forever. So let's put a guy in here. He's got a couple of buckets he's carrying uphill there to our... Now let's put a guy up here that's kind of waiting on him, to leaning on his broom there. And maybe we'll give this guy a little kind of pot there where he's getting these buckets filled out of. And all of a sudden we have a great deal of interest now up on this roof, and it tells a story. There's a couple of guys working up here and they're tar mopping. Maybe they're doing a little patchwork, maybe they're doing a full job, but they're certainly working on the roof, and I've got some life now added to that roof. Now what I would need to do is add a ladder, either back here at the back, or if I have a shorter building beside here, I might have a ladder coming up from the side. Now we'll take a look at adding some other details to the sides of the building, as well as dry transfers and some lettering. One of the great things about buildings are awnings. Awnings back over the work area. This was done with a piece of corrugated plastic and a couple of little braces, scraps that we had out of the scrap bin. The two-tone effect was done by putting a piece of masking tape down the center, spraying our weathering on so that it hit the sides, pull the weathering tape off, and now we have two coats on each side and one coat of weathering down the middle. Makes it look like individual pieces of corrugated iron. We did the same thing around on the front to give that individual look. Also, John Lawrence, one of our instructors here at the university, likes to go to Hobby Lobby or Michael's or whatever, look at the bead department, and this is one of the little star sequins that they get, and this one has been painted black and a wire added to it, and we can add this on right along with the rest of the ones that you can see have been put on here. And now we have a great looking brace essentially on our kit, and we can try and get a little bit tighter here to show you what those look like. And it's an absolutely fantastic idea. It's really quick and it makes the building look absolutely wonderful. Remember when we first started, we made a template of the front of the building, and here it is again. Come back, and now we've actually glued the acetate onto the front of it. And in the meantime, I made a template for the doorway, and we'll fasten that down under our acetate and tape it so it can't move. We can then bring in the burnishers that we're going to use. I like two different types. This is Letraset in black, and the white one is a Woodland Scenics. We'll actually use the Woodland Scenics one for applying the dry transfers. Bring the dry transfer sheet in. It's a white number sheet. We're going to use it for the numbers on the top of the doorway up in the clear story. Using white because our building is going to actually be black in the final rendition of how we're doing it. We'll pick any three numbers. It doesn't make a difference. You may want to actually number yours in order if you're doing a big street where the fronts can actually be seen. But in this case, we just did any numbers. Line them up. Now we'll go for cutting that doorway out, and we'll score it along the side and along the bottom so that we can snap it off later. And we'll bring in the dry transfer for the left top window. It's going to be a bar sign this time, and we'll line it up. And we want to line this up so that it has a nice square feel to it on the sheet, and I use the lines that are on the sheet to kind of line it up. Hold it down on the right side, check it and make sure it's transferred, and my finger where I touched it, your finger heat actually helps in transferring or making a dry transfer adhere better. So you'll notice that for each time we're going to touch it with our finger. We'll do the slit sign up on the right now. We'll line it up first, transfer, hold it down and make sure it did transfer, and finger heat just to make sure they stay. Do one dry transfer down in the left corner, a no minor sign. Check to make sure it transferred, and a little heat to make sure it's down tight. Now what we can do is come in and cut for the sides. We've got to allow for sidewalls that are now present. When we drew the front, it was whole, but now we have sidewalls that we have to allow for, and on the doorway, we have to allow for the doorway width, which is in place. So I'm cutting just inside of the two side picture windows on the bottom, a little bit above the area of the door to clear the plastic that's in there. And now we can lift the acetate, and we'll make sure it's down. Now we can score again on part of it and snap it. We're in good shape. We want a little score again on the doorway, just as insurance. The acetate doesn't snap quite as easily as some other things do. And then we'll take the number sheet, check it in the doorway, and then check the windows, and everything's in good shape. Alright, we're on the home stretch, but one of our final details is to put a blackout curtain in. We could just use the regular cardboard, but then it shows the texture. So what I'm doing here is I've cut two pieces of paper that are cut to the height of the building on the inside, cut them to the diagonal dimension, test fit them, make sure they fit. Then in the center, both up and down and across, I cut a slot halfway down so that they'll finger together. And then I'm going to fit those into the building, and this may take a little pushing because it's made to fit tight. The advantage here is that they show the glazing. They let the glass actually have a glare, which it would have on a real building, not flat like it would if you put a piece of paper in. Alright, now we're going to add some paper signs to our building to the side. So we've picked one out here to cut out. And we'll take it. Now we could sand it on the sanding block. I prefer to do it with an X-Acto knife, but it's personal preference. You can sand it off just as well. You just have to do it very gently. What we're trying to do is get this paper down, excuse the expression, but paper thin. You can see I've already scraped off some of the back there. I'm trying to delayer the paper and get it down to just that very top layer where the printing is. Get it down really thin. And then at that point, we're going to take some Woodland Scenic cement, full strength, and we're just going to use it to moisten it underneath and on top, and that will set that paper right down onto the side of the building. Now we're going to weather our building with some pigments. Now pigments and chalks can be used not really interchangeably. The chalks, if we put them on, they don't tend to stay quite as well. When we use dull coat, they tend to come off. The pigments, as you can see here, really stick well. If I have too much of the pigment, I can either wipe it like I am, or you can take a wet towel and come back and wash it a little bit. I'm also going to apply some to the sign. The pigments are available from either Bragdon Enterprises or from Bar Mills. They both have them available. We'll do the chimneys, and then we'll work the rest of the way around the building, doing the chimneys and windows all around. We're also going to do the fronts on the doors. We've got to take some of that white down. It's a little bit too bright, or as an old friend of mine used to say, bilious. A little bit too much. We'll do it on all the gray pieces, windows, doors, anything that has a little brightness to it. We want to take it down and make it look like the weathering. The weather has blown through our town and is actually weathering things. And as soon as we get that weathering done, we'll be ready to take our building to the paint booth, and we're going to tone it down a little bit overall as a final step. All right, we've pretty much finished up all the weathering here in our front. We have all the pigments across everywhere. It's kind of toned down and it's looking pretty good. And we've added the pigments to the side of our building. But to me, the common brick color now is entirely too bright. As we said before, weathering that moves through town blows on every building and weathers every building in our town. So one thing that we need to do now is tone down that common brick. So we'll take it to the paint booth, and basically all we're going to do is make a general application of the same weathered black that we've used on the roof back onto our side. And we'll see what that looks like. All right, the first thing we're going to do here is test and make sure that our spray pattern is right. I don't want too much on there. Just a little bit like that would be pretty good. If I get too close, I get too much. So use the white card just to kind of test the distance that I'm going to hold the airbrush back. Then I've set up a turntable here so that I can revolve the model as I paint. And the only thing I'm going to work on now are going to be the two side walls. Just a light little, bring that yellow down just a little bit. Not much, just a little bit. And that's actually probably pretty good right there. And that quick. Now with the yellow toned down on the sides to match the weathering that we have on the front, I think we have a great looking building. The weathering just needs to match all the way around, and this building is certainly worthy of us putting in on our town. Here we can see a couple of the buildings that we've worked on and how much detail we've added to them by going just a little bit beyond the ordinary construction steps. We've added awnings, which I think adds a great deal of interest to a building. We've added signage. And one thing our crossed black pieces of paper do is they keep you from seeing through the building as you are in the upper windows here. It's a great step to do to black out a building, keeps a person from seeing through the building in any one direction. And you can always come back and add a light in one of those quadrants if you wanted to. We also could have taken our building we were working on, or the other one, and added, let's say, a gas meter into the side of the building at the back or along the side. Either one would have been very good to have added some interest. We put some detail on top. We could have put our people back up there on top. Lots of things that we can do to add to make buildings have a great deal of interest. The techniques we've used pretty much applicable to any plastic kit. I certainly want to thank you for watching today. We've greatly enjoyed putting this presentation on for you. We've shown you today about DPM buildings, kits, N-scale, HO, and O-scale. Again, the only difference in O-scale is that you would have used epoxy cements. We've shown you some ideas on weathering and how to plant buildings, signage, all kinds of things to make you think about what can I do to make my town come to life. Next DVD will be on the DPM modular system and how to use them. This one is only 4 modules in size. Of course, our warehouse here is much larger. And they also allow you the freedom to design buildings that are oddly shaped. It's a great way to fit buildings directly to your railroad. We'll also offer subjects in the future on scratch building made simple, scenery, benchwork, and wiring in DCC. Be sure and stay tuned and watch for our DVDs as they begin to come out. We want to thank you for joining us today, and on behalf of the staff, I'm Miles Hale. Come back and see us soon.